all of Danzo's conspiracies in the Naruto anime. Hey, young grasshopper, have you ever stopped to pay attention to all the times Danzo schemed in the anime? Because that old man was a real trickster, kid, and honestly, I never really noticed all the times that old guy stuck his nose into things in the anime. On the contrary, I didn't even know. I think I only ever noticed it in passing. And now, rewatching Naruto, I stopped and paid attention to every time Danzo schemed and completely changed the course of the anime story. If I made a video here about what if Danzo never existed, Naruto would definitely be a completely different anime. He was a much more important character than most people think. Let's go! I'm going to go through with you here all the times Danzo conspired, and the most important ones, right? He probably pulled off some other shady stuff too, but we just never found out about it. To start with, Danzo was responsible. He was one of the main people responsible for the creation of Akatsuki as the criminal organization we know. Why? The story we know about the creation of Akatsuki is more connected, at first, to Obito, right? When Obito switches sides and goes after Nagato. And after he brings together himself, Nagato, and Konan, Akatsuki is basically formed, and then they just go on to recruit the other members, right? So, at first, the story we know is that Nagato, Yahiko, and Konan created Akatsuki as an organization to deal with wars in a peaceful way, right? But they ended up being betrayed by Hanzo of the Salamander, who wanted to destroy their organization because he was afraid they would take control of the Hidden Rain Village, right? And then Nagato gets outraged, and they go on to create Akatsuki because of that. But during the Fourth Great Ninja War, we find out that this wasn't the whole truth about what really happened. And Danzo is largely to blame for all of this happening. Why? Akatsuki really was an organization focused on peace. They didn't want to take control of the Hidden Rain Village, and they wanted to resolve all the conflicts there through dialogue, right? They would only fight back if someone came to attack them, just to defend themselves, and even then, they never actually killed anyone. Those guys were basically like DC superheroes. But, however, nevertheless, Danzo, the devil from the Leaf Village, didn't want that peace and love vibe that Akatsuki wanted. No way. What Danzo wanted was war, gunfire, fighting, and explosions between the Stone Village, the Rain Village, and the more those guys could kill each other, the more his enemies could tear each other apart, the better it was for the Leaf Village, at least in Danzo's mind. So what does he do? He takes Anbu ninjas under his control and has them pose as Stone Village ninjas, and then these supposed Stone Village ninjas attack members of Akatsuki, as if they were representatives of the Stone Village. And apparently, he does the same thing with Hanzo's subordinates. But instead of pretending to be Stone Village ninjas, he has them pose as Akatsuki ninjas and takes out those guys from the SDO, from the Stone Village. No! Hanzo's subordinates, right? So he takes the bodies of Hanzo's subordinates, puts them there, and tells Hanzo that it was the Akatsuki who took them out. And Hanzo goes and believes it. Why does he believe Danzo? It's hard to say for sure. It's not really explained, right? But for sure, Danzo did it so well that it was really believable, you know? Maybe there were even witnesses who saw the Akatsuki people, even though it wasn't really them. It was just Danzo's ninjas in disguise, but maybe there were even witnesses. So, because of this conspiracy that Danzo pulled off with Hanzo, all of that happened. Hanzo had no beef at all with the Akatsuki. On the contrary, he approved of Akatsuki's methods and said, "No. A group that wants to achieve peace not through force, but through dialogue. I really support this group." It was only at that moment that Danzo conspired. He lied, saying that they had cancelled the CPF of his subordinate, that they were trying to take control of the Hidden Rain Village by force. That's when Hanzo decides to take action. So here we have Danzo's first big conspiracy, which I didn't know about, and it was a heavy one, my friend. Pretty much right? Because most likely Obito was already going to do something similar, but when he saw that Danzo was already at it, he just let Danzo do his thing. I've already got this crazy guy doing it, so let the man work. But Obito was already on that path. In fact, Obito also helps out, right? This event actually happened because he stopped the Akatsuki members who were going to warn Nagato and Yahiko about the ambush, right? Now let's move on to Danzo's second conspiracy, which was another one I didn't know about and only found out about much more recently. Danzo, along with Orochimaru, was actually the main reason Kabuto became a villain. Just imagine, my friend, if it weren't for Danzo, we probably wouldn't have had the fourth Great Ninja War, right? At least not the way it happened with Edo Tensei, because there wouldn't have been Kabuto, there wouldn't have been Kabuto. A lot of the things Orochimaru did, he wouldn't have been able to do without Kabuto, so you can be sure that was a huge, huge turning point in the anime story, you know? So, what exactly did Danzo do? Basically, Kabuto was a war orphan. He was found by an orphanage from the village of the Rain. Wait, not the village of the Rain, from the village of the Leaf. And that orphanage raised Kabuto while he was a kid. But this orphanage also helped the ninjas from the Leaf Village when they came back injured from war, and they basically did the first medical treatments for them, right? And Kabuto had ninja skills. He learned from the nun at the orphanage, right? She taught him, and he was really talented since he was a kid, so people started to notice his skills, especially Orochimaru. And Orochimaru tipped off Danzo, right? That the kid was talented, and since he was a skilled orphan, nobody even knew his real name. He was perfect to become a ninja spy, right? Because he didn't have a name, didn't have a family, didn't have anyone. So he's the perfect person to be a spy, a guy with no name, right? A double agent. So Danzo goes to the orphanage and does two things. First, he takes the nun who was taking care of Kabuto. We find out that this nun, she had already been a ninja, right? And she was a ninja spy, a double agent everywhere. But she had left that life of staying alone in the orphanage. But then he threatens her, says they meet her and she has to go. If she didn't go, things would go badly for the orphanage. And besides her, they also want to take a child to be trained and become an Anbu agent. So this child, they say there that they can ask which of the children wants to go, since many of them, he knew, wanted to become ninjas. And Kabuto volunteers to become the ninja, right? This ninja from Danzo's foundation, right? But later we also find out that Kabuto did this kind of in exchange for the mother. You know, the nun there, not being called up, right? He said, "No, I'll go in her place. I'll be the spy you need instead of her." And Danzo lies to him, saying that he agrees, right? But he doesn't actually agree, right? He takes Kabuto and takes her too, and sends them somewhere else. So Kabuto spends his life, or at least a good part of it, as a spy for the Leaf Village, infiltrating all sorts of different villages, gathering information for the Leaf Village. And they do the same thing with the nun, sending her on all sorts of missions to infiltrate places and so on, right? But what do they do to her? They basically brainwash her, because she would ask for photos of Kabuto to know that he was okay. And they kind of used that to get her to go, sort of guaranteeing Kabuto's safety, or at least pretending to. But they kept sending her different photos each time, like first a photo of a child who was Kabuto, then another photo of a child who looked a lot like Kabuto, and they kept making these changes over time, you know? Until there came a point when he was older, right? He went from being a child to a teenager, still looked like Kabuto, but it wasn't Kabuto anymore. It was just someone who looked similar, but was actually different. So, in her mind, Kabuto became someone else. He was that guy in the photo, who actually wasn't Kabuto at all. So, on her last mission, for some reason, neither she nor Kabuto were useful to those guys anymore. I don't know why. Actually, they had a lot of information about the Leaf Village, conspiracies and all that investigative stuff, that those guys didn't want to get out, you know? So they wanted to, well, cancel the CPF of both of them at the same time. So he sends the nun, who was the one taking care of Kabuto, to cancel Kabuto's CPF. But to her, he wasn't Kabuto anymore. In her mind, he was already someone else because of the brainwashing. She tries to do it, but Kabuto manages to escape, right? He finishes her off and ends up really messed up in the head. He doesn't understand why that happened, why she tried to attack him, why she didn't remember him in the end, you know. Right before she kicked the bucket, and then Orochimaru explains everything to Kabuto and invites him to live life, you know, far from the Leaf Village and become a bad guy. So basically, Kabuto only turned out the way he did because of Danzo. See that? You see? Look at the two little things Danzo did. He was behind the creation of the Akatsuki and also created one of the worst villains in Naruto Shippuden, Kabuto, right? And it doesn't stop there. Danzo was basically the guy who ordered the Uchiha Massacre, because at that time Itachi was working as a double agent, right? And he was passing along information that the clan was organizing a coup. But there were two things there that wanted to stop this coup, besides Danzo, right? One was Hiruzen, who wanted to prevent the coup through negotiation. And then we also have Shursui, who wanted to stop the coup by brainwashing Fugaku, or anyone else who needed it, right? So Danzo does two things to make sure neither of those plans could happen. First, he tries to cancel Shursui by stealing his eyes, right? But in reality, he only manages to steal one. And then we know that Shursui ends up canceling himself, giving his other eye to Itachi, right? So that way of stopping the Uchiha clan's coup was already off the table. And the part where Hiruzen wanted to talk to the guys before things got violent, Danzo basically doesn't let that happen, because he talks to Itachi afterwards, right, after that meeting where Hiruzen says he doesn't want the attack on the Uchiha clan yet, right? So Danzo talks only and exclusively with Itachi and tells him that he himself needs to do it, or else his brother, Sasuke, will die. He basically gave him two choices. Look, you can choose not to do what I'm about to tell you, which is to go there and take out everyone, right, and die along with your clan if you want to fight for them, and everyone will die, including your brother. Or you can do it, and then he kind of guaranteed Sasuke's life, right? If you do this, I'll let your little brother live. And one of the reasons Itachi accepted, besides this threat against Sasuke, right, because if he didn't do it, Danzo was basically saying Sasuke would die, or at the very least would have to live as a fugitive, since if he wanted to survive, he'd have to run away with Sasuke. The other reason Itachi agreed, which Danzo doesn't even mention, is that Itachi didn't want to tarnish the clan's name, right? Actually, Danzo does talk about that. He says that instead of the clan being seen as a clan of traitors, as a coup-plotting clan, only Itachi would be seen as a rogue ninja. So it's much better for the Uchiha clan, for the Uchiha clan's legacy, to be remembered as a loyal clan that had one rogue ninja who did all that terrible stuff, rather than being known as a clan of traitors or coup-plotters. And with Itachi weighing these sort of threats that Danzo made to him, he decided to go through with the Uchiha massacre, right? So basically, it was Danzo who orchestrated this little tragedy in the anime that pretty much drives the entire plot, right? Danzo conspired with Orochimaru for the attack on the Leaf Village back in the original Naruto series. At first, we have no idea about this, right? Because in the original Naruto, Danzo barely even shows up. And if he does show up, it's very briefly, so we had no idea that this could have happened. But yes, Danzo knew about Orochimaru's attack on the Leaf Village and let it happen. Most likely, I don't remember if this was shown exactly, but most likely, Danzo had an agreement with Orochimaru to take out Hiruzen, right? And that's the reason why he conspired with Orochimaru for the attack. He basically wanted Hiruzen dead and then wanted to take control of the Leaf Village himself, becoming Hokage, right? Because, and even if that didn't actually happen, or wasn't explicitly shown in dialogue, what proves that this really happened? First, Danzo knew Kabuto. Danzo knew who Kabuto was. Up until about the age Kabuto was during the attack in the original Naruto, Danzo knew Kabuto, and Kabuto had been a ninja under Danzo's orders. He was one of Danzo's henchmen. So just imagine, how could Kabuto be taking part in the Chunin exams, the ones he actually participates in, without Danzo knowing about it? It was simply impossible. There was no way Kabuto could be there in the way he was, right? He wasn't like Orochimaru, who was basically inside someone else, you know. It was impossible for Danzo not to know. Danzo basically knew everything that happened in Konoha, and Kabuto wasn't even trying to hide, right? So yes, Danzo definitely knew who Kabuto was, knew that Kabuto was working for Orochimaru, and Danzo had worked with Orochimaru for a long time, ever since he was still in the Leaf Village. Back when things were still normal, right? He hadn't switched sides yet. Even after Orochimaru, while still in the Leaf Village, was already doing his experiments on humans and all that, with Hashirama's cells, Danzo already knew Orochimaru and was scheming with him. Even when Orochimaru had become a traitor and after he left the Leaf Village, Danzo kept up his shady dealings with Orochimaru. And what proves this, besides the attack on the Leaf Village that Danzo knew about and didn't intervene in, right? It's the fact that Danzo himself has Hashirama's cells implanted in him, something that was done by Orochimaru himself. There wasn't anyone else who had that technology here. Who's researching that, right? And to wrap it up, Danzo's last conspiracy, which was basically to become the leader of the entire world, happened at the Five Kage Summit, right? After Danzo becomes Hokage, right? When Pain attacks the Leaf Village and Tsunade is left in a coma, Danzo goes to the Five Kage Summit, where he conspires. He pulls some shady tricks there to try to become the leader of the 5 great nations that were about to fight in the Great War, right? And how does he do that? Basically, he uses Shirsui's Genjutsu, Shirsui's Eye, which we know is probably the most powerful eye for Genjutsu shown in the anime, and he uses this eye to control the actions of the meeting's mediator, making him, by giving the reasons Danzo thought were most convenient, nominate Danzo himself to be the supreme leader of the whole world, the one who would command the 5 great nations, right? And the guys were almost accepting it because the arguments the guy was giving were actually pretty plausible, right? The arguments that Danzo made the guy give. But at a certain point in the meeting, a guy from the Village of the Rain, one of the ninjas there, one of the Mizuki's bodyguards, using the Byakugan he had stolen from the Hyuga clan, manages to see Danzo using Genjutsu and can see the chakra of the mediator, right? Who's kind of out of it, like you get when you're being controlled by a Genjutsu. So he sees this and calls Danzo out on the spot, right? Then Danzo is left there looking like crap because he got caught red-handed, right? And the mediator even says something like, "Man, that's rough, huh?" The worst part is, if he hadn't controlled the mediator, he even says it himself, it's possible that the mediator, on his own, might have chosen Danzo to be the leader, because in a way, it was kind of a logical choice. But after he pulled that stunt, man, he totally blew any chance he had of becoming the leader, right? Since he basically betrayed everyone there and tried to fool the group, right? But then Danzo said he couldn't just leave that decision up to chance, or to what everyone else wanted. He had to make sure the right choice was made, you know? But in the end, it backfired on him, and we all know he ends up getting taken out, right? That was Danzo's last scheme, and it was the only one I mentioned here that didn't work out, right? Because all the others kind of worked, but also went wrong, you know? But tell me, young grasshopper, did you know about all these schemes, all these conspiracies of Danzo? You didn't know? Or if there's another, leave it in the comments. I want your opinion. Alright, I'm signing off here, guys. See you in the next video. Thanks.